past is central to understanding two things. First of all, why society is structured as it is, which we're going to get into in this part, and also, as we get into the final part, how and why we can open the door and bring an end to this nonsense. So what I'm going to talk about in this section is some of the rather bizarre background, just me, and going into present-day events and how that pans out across what's happening now. So the idea is to introduce, obviously, a big brother global society, very much in the global terms of 1984. And this is the basic structure they're looking for. And I'm going to go through a series in this section of what I call coordinates. We know the coordinates, the world starts to make sense, and what's happening in the world makes sense, because if you know the outcome that is wanted, you can understand the sequences of events that is taking us there, and we can understand there how we can intervene in that. So this is the structure. Very simply, if there's the few and you're going to control the many, you have to centralize decision-making. Because the more points of decision-making there are, the more diversity of decision-making, the less control you're going to have over those decisions. It's like in the old days when I was a kid. They used to have lots of acts where they have people keeping plates spinning on sticks, loads of them all over the stage. And if you have too many plates and too many sticks, too many points of decision-making, then you have plates crashing all over the place. You can't keep control of it. What you want really is one big plate and one big stick, which keep that going forever from a central point. That's the idea. And they want a structure with a world government that would dictate to every country in the world, a world central bank. I'll get into this more in this section. That's fundamentally, not only, but fundamentally one of the reasons for the engineered economic collapse. They want a one world currency, electronic money, no cash, fundamental implications for freedom in that. A world army which would impose the will of the world government on any country that didn't want to accept it, and a microchip population connected to a global computer and the global positioning satellite system. Under that, they want the super states, get into this more later, and under that, they want to break nation states up into regions, which they're already in the process of moving towards, to deunify in a unified response to the edifice of power above. So that's the basic structure. And once we realize that's the outcome they want, you can start to read the world and world events in a very different way. But what I would emphasize is I'm now going to talk about the play-out world, the world as it unfolds in the daily experience. But the fundamental behind it is what we were talking about earlier. The whole thing is about manipulating the way we decode reality, what we experience through the way we perceive the virtual reality game, to stop us understanding that we are consciousness, to put us in the eggshells of little me, and to manipulate the way that we our heads world. That's all the way running through everything. So, once upon a virtual reality, I'm going to just go through a sequence of events that kind of brought us to where we are now. And I'll pick it up in this period, I don't know, 12,000 years ago, maybe more, where there are so many stories and myths. I think it's about 2,000 books in print, I was reading somewhere, about Atlantis and these civilizations, of advanced civilizations, which existed in what is to conventional history, prehistory. And these civilizations were destroyed by vast cataclysmic events, which you can see recorded in the ancient texts and verbal histories of every single ancient culture. Of course, the famous one in the Bible is the Great Flood and all that stuff, but that is mirrored in ancient cultures all over the world. This great cataclysmic period of geological and upheavals, and volcanic upheavals. And there's a very good book called When the Earth Nearly Died, or The Day the Earth Nearly Died, where the researchers have looked at the myths, or what we call myths, of all these stories around the world of the great cataclysmic events, and then they've looked at the biological and geological evidence to see if it supports the stories in the myths. And it does, very, very compellingly. And, of course, like I say, Noah and the biblical story of the Great Flood is the most famous one, but you take that back to its origin, or at least one of its origins, and you go back into ancient Sumer long before, where the same story was told, but it's told everywhere. Now, 98% of what I'm talking about today is come from hard research. Where it hasn't, I'll tell you. And I'd got to a certain point of taking this back from the physical to trying to get an understanding of what was behind these cataclysmic events, and actually what's behind this crazy world, which at one time was not crazy. Probably not that long ago was not crazy. Again, one of the other common themes is that before the cataclysmic events, there was what is often referred to as a golden age of great harmony and a great abundance, when it was almost like a utopian world. And then the cataclysmic events came and everything changed. And I was in America at a place called Sedona in Arizona about 2 months ago. Well, maybe less than that anyway, not that it matters. And I went into this, should we say, other state of consciousness. For many, many years, I've been going into coma-like states where it's just like unbelievably deep, and sometimes it takes a half an hour, 45 minutes to come out of them very, very slowly. But what suddenly happened in the last few weeks since the turn of the year is I'm going into these deep states, but I'm holding consciousness when I go there. And what happened to me as I went into one of these states just a few weeks ago, I never talked about this before, funnily enough, and this kind of voice started talking to me about what the cataclysmic events were all about and what this situation in the world is all about. And I can only give it you and take it as you will. And what it was that at one point, well, actually, not just at one point, but up to the point where these cataclysmic events happened, the energy field of this Earth and further out was extremely harmonious, extremely balanced, vibrating in a very balanced, harmonious way. And this manifested down to the physical, into the decoded world, as a balanced, loving, abundant, sharing, caring society, which was vastly, vastly different to the way it is now. And what I was then shown, and what the voice referred to as the schism, happened. And what I saw, I found this picture on the internet, which kind of gives a feel for it. What I saw as this voice was talking about the schism was a harmonious energy field, and then through the center of it went this bright blue, like electrical charge, almost like lightning. And everything started vibrating in a chaotic way. And it called it the schism. And as this manifested down through the vibrational into the decoded world, it manifested itself as a physical version of this schism, which was massive geological events, which not only transformed this reality, or this part of this reality physically in the way that's recorded by the ancients and through to the present day, but it fundamentally changed this reality mentally and emotionally, because suddenly we were living in a chaotic energy environment which was being decoded into the physical, and suddenly the chaos and conflict of the schism was manifesting itself as chaotic and conflict and all the rest of it that started to come into the world. And the schism is what has created the schism within human society that wasn't there before. And as I'll get to in the third section today, there's increasing evidence that this schism, indeed this voice went on to say, this schism is now in the process of being corrected. And the other thing this voice said was, people need to understand in relation to this that every single thing is conscious. Some things more conscious than others, but everything has a consciousness. And in fact, the phrase it used was everything has a self-awareness, everything has a self-identity. And it was saying that this schism has a self-identity. It's consciousness. So it has a self-identity. And its self-identity is one of what we would call evil, but what in real terms is fundamental imbalance. Loss of harmony, loss of connection to what we would call in the first part of this presentation, heart consciousness. And so this energetic imbalance has become holographic imbalance in the way that it's decoded. Another interesting thing is that, again, I'll come to this part again in the last section with something else, but before the schism, the energy in this reality was so harmonious, so in tune with the human form, and so much more powerful that we didn't eat food. We lived off the energy, everything. Because what is food? It's just holographic energy. That's what it is. And we consume food, we're consuming energy. We used to live off the energy. Some people, even today, it's very, very difficult today because of the energy environment compared with what it was, still live off what they call prana. They live off energy. They don't eat food. And what I come to understand is that when this energy changed and our ability to get sustenance from energy without food changed, we needed to bridge that gap. We needed to bridge that difference between the energy as was and the energy that replaced it in a much less powerful way, and to bridge that gap for the energy requirements of the body computer was to eat food. This also applied to what we call the animal kingdom. What it was saying was, before, there was no law of the wild. That's not how it was meant to be. You know, we live on a planet that's a bloody killing field. Everything is killing everything else and living off the demise of everything else. And crucial to that is the need for the predator to eat the predated. And so you have this conflict, this fear, where, again, adding massively to the fear as a expression of this schism energy, you've got animals all the time, and humans come to that too, but animals all day are in fear of predators. It's a constant experience of fear. And what it was saying was, although the Bible talks about the wolf laying down with the lamb, a lot of people talk about the lion laying down with the lamb. The point is, when there was no need to eat food and therefore be a predator, there was no conflict, there was no fear, and everything was in harmony. I know it's very difficult to get the mind around that, given what we're experiencing today, but if you think of harmonious energetic environment and then a very different one, the two express themselves physically, as they always do, in the society that we live in. So when these great cataclysmic events were taking place, people of advanced knowledge started to move before and after into other parts of the world. And they took with them this advanced knowledge. And as the world started to recover from these great cataclysmic events, certain societies in different parts of the world that were far more advanced than in other parts of the world started to appear. They started to appear based on this original knowledge that was global, which had now started to remanifest in a lesser way in isolated communities in these parts of the world particularly. And when you look around the world, you can see how the original knowledge in so many ways expresses itself in different ways, but it's the same knowledge in different societies, because the knowledge got fragmented and then went its own way in these, for a while, isolated societies, and so got expressed in different ways. But it's the same knowledge. Credo Mutwa, my friend, the Zulu shaman in South Africa, he threw the bones for me a couple of times. These are carved bones, which the symbols represent something, and he brings the basket, you put your hands over the basket. What are you doing? You're putting your energy field into the energy field, because everything's energy. We're decoding it into a physical, like a bone or something, but actually it's energy. You're putting your energy into the bones. And those symbols, by what they represent, carry a frequency field of what they represent. And therefore, they lock into your energy field in certain ways where they sync with things that are happening in your energy field. So then you throw the bones, and where the bones end up is decided before you've even thrown them, when they're in the basket, because of the energetic, magnetic connections that have been made there. Then you throw them, and then they become like a symbolic, to one who knows what they're doing, a symbolic picture of what's going on in your energy field. And people like Credo Mutwa look at the relationship of different things to each other, and they read them in that way. But the point I'm making is when he did that for me, I thought, it's just like throwing the rune stones in another part of the world. It's just like the tarot cards in another part of the world. Same reason. The reason you pick that tarot card out and not that one is because of the energetic connection you make to that one, because that symbol represents something within you. It's all energy. It's all magnetic energy connecting. And also, as these advanced peoples moved into these different parts of the world, one being Atlantis civilization and the other one Mu, or Lemuria, as it later became known to some people, they took, indeed before the cataclysms and after, they took this advanced knowledge and built these fantastic structures that some of which we'd even struggle to build today, because they were operating on a level of knowledge that is not available in the mainstream today, though we get there. This is Peru, where because mainstream history, it's like primitive, less primitive, less primitive, less primitive, us. There's no like, hey, it could be not quite that simple. And when you go to these advanced times, way, way back, you see fantastic structures. These are hundreds of tons, these stones, and you couldn't put a cigarette paper between them. Primitive people built them, read it somewhere. Then you've got the Nazca lines in Peru, which were only seen in their entirety, these insects and birds that are created by scoring away the topsoil and revealing the white below, in one continuous line, and some of them were only seen in their entirety in modern times when people were flying over them at 1,000, 2,000 feet. And this is a key area of the world in terms of that re-emerging knowledge after the cataclysmic times, sometime afterwards too. And these are the ancient societies that were more advanced than so much of the rest of the world. And there's a common theme that you find among these ancient societies, along with the cataclysms and stuff like that. And that is of an interbreeding between what clearly appeared to be a non-human race and humans to create hybrid bloodlines. Now, this, of course, is the most famous one. It's in the Bible. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were the old men of renown in Genesis. But that basic theme of an interbreeding between a non-human race and humans creating a hybrid bloodline is found all over the world. It's found in this area of the world, which in terms of the bloodlines that are in the positions of power today, very, very significant. This area of Sumer, which became Babylon in what we call Mesopotamia, and the land between two rivers, and of course, what do we call that today? Iraq. Now, the invasion of Iraq was for many reasons. Oil, yes. Control, yes. Multi-reasons. It's very rarely for one reason. But another reason in that package was because that land we now call Iraq is very historically significant to the bloodlines that in the modern world are behind things like the invasion of Iraq, also Egypt and the Indus Valley culture. And this particularly is very significant in terms of the way the world is controlled today. Sumer, which became Babylon. And again, you have the stories from thousands of clay tablets that were found in Iraq and have been translated. I call them the Sumerian tablets. And they talk, like all these others around the world, of this interbreeding between non-humans and humans to create this hybrid bloodline. I'm going to go too much into this because there's so much about the present day I want to get through in this section. But these bloodlines, these hybrids, became the elite. They claimed to be, one of their terms was demigods, part human, part gods, as these non-human groups were perceived to be, because they had abilities to do things because of their advanced knowledge that made them appear godlike. And the old, ancient, recurring theme of the divine right to rule, which is what? The right to rule because of your bloodline, because of your DNA. We have a head of state, you have a head of state, same one, in Buckingham Palace, who is only head of state because of her bloodline, because of her DNA. If she had a different DNA, she might be cleaning the throne, not sitting on it. That's how ridiculous it is. So even today we have this still running. And in the background, among those that control banking and business and media, we seriously have it running. It's just not official like it is with the official royal families. And these demigods, these hybrid bloodlines, were the ones that ended up in the positions of royal power, and they fought among each other like crazy. For instance, even in China, the emperors claimed the right to be emperor because of their connection to what they called the serpent gods. And that's a common theme, the serpent or the reptilian figure. So these bloodlines, let me just hold on that for a second. These bloodlines moved out of that part of the world as what we call time past, and they moved up into Europe. And one of the places that they established themselves was Rome, where they were the bloodlines behind the Roman Empire. Now, one of the common themes that you find wherever these bloodlines went is an empire. You had the Babylonian Empire, for instance. They had the Sumer Empire before that, though that's not recognized in official history too much. And then you had the Roman Empire, and then they moved up into Northern Europe and eventually located their headquarters in Britain, particularly London. And what followed that? The British Empire, on which it was said the sun never set because it was so vast. And then we had this sleight of hand, because what the British Empire and the others, the French Empire and others in Europe too, same, but the British Empire was the most significant because of its size, what they did was export the bloodline all over the world. And, crucially, I'll get to this later, the secret society network, which follows the bloodline, to manipulate it and its representatives into positions of power to control the societies they target. So what we had when the colonial empires apparently on the surface broke up was global Babylon. Because what happened on the surface, the colonial powers gave independence to the countries like Australia and America and stuff like that. But in truth, what happened was the bloodline and the secret society network stayed in those countries and have gone on controlling those countries ever since, from a central point in Europe. Overwhelmingly London, but there are other places in Europe too, where the very significant centers of power for this bloodline network. And there's two types of control. There's a control you can see, touch, and taste: communism, apartheid, fascism. And at least the people under those tyrannies understand the situation they're in. They're in a tyranny. And they can see, at least the front men, who are in control of the tyranny. Eventually, it might take a long time, but eventually there will be a rebellion against that kind of tyranny where you know where you stand. The greatest form of control, which can go on forever until it's exposed, is a tyranny you can't see, touch, and taste, where you're sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bars. Because people don't rebel against not being free when they think they are. And so what happened in this sleight of hand, when the colonial powers apparently gave independence, is there was a move from a tyranny you could see, colonial control from London overwhelmingly, to a tyranny you couldn't see, which is called democracy, which is called putting a cross on a piece of paper every 4 or 5 years, and then the people you voted for or not voted for often doing what they bloody like. It's called freedom. It's very good. I want to try it sometime. And so what we've had is a hidden tyranny ever since, masquerading as freedom. And what these bloodlines and the secret society network they control have done is set up the equivalent of a transnational corporation. As transnational corporations work, they have a headquarters, and then in the different countries they have subsidiaries. And the subsidiaries do what the headquarters tell them to do. Corporate policy, they call it. Well, what these bloodlines have done is exactly the same, only it's secret societies for subsidiaries. The headquarters, the center of the web in Europe, dictates the ongoing policy, which is constant centralization of power in every area of our lives to bring about this point where the few can control the many from a central point. And in each country is the subsidiary network of the secret society network, and that network in each country has the job, and it's bloody completed it a long time ago now, of controlling that country's government, any political party that has any chance of forming a government, its banking system, its transnational corporation system, its media ownership, and the military, and all these other institutions, medicine, science. And so, having established that in different countries around the world, when the central point, the spider in the center of the web in Europe, says, this is what's going to happen now, these subsidiary groups start to bring it about in their sphere of influence, their country. And this is how you see, and it's more and more blatant now, this is how you see the same things happening in every country virtually at the same time. When there's a problem, like a financial crisis, engineered, of course, then the reaction to the problem, and maybe we could sit down and say, well, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do that. What about that? Try that. No, there's one solution. And in the case we're experiencing now, it's throwing infinite amounts of what we call money at the banking system that created the problem. That is the answer all over the place, because that is how it's coordinated to be. The idea is to control through this web every area of the world. And they've been doing it covertly and building up that control to the point now, and I said this years ago, there's going to come a point, because it has to come, if they want to bring from the secret and hidden into changes in society, there has to come a point where this stuff breaks the surface where we can see it, because it has to if it's going to become the changes in society they want. And we're at that point now where it's clearly broken the surface and we can see it. And what they've done is created this tapestry, web of transnational corporations and groupings which appear to be different and have different owners and different agendas and competing with each other. But it's like going down a high street and you see all these different names, and some of them seem to be competing with each other. But when you do the research and you go back and you look at the holding companies, you find that the same holding company controls this and that and that and that, and actually controls this, which is apparently competing with that. And this is what they've done. These families and their secret society network, which go under the name of Illuminati, the illuminated ones, they are the force that is ultimately behind all these apparently unconnected groups and corporations, and they move as one unit as a result. And the idea is to imprison humanity in the way that Orwell described, and the way we're experiencing now, not even by the day, but by the bloody hour, of more and more surveillance, more and more control, more and more suppression, more and more police state. And in doing so, manipulating the way we perceive reality, so we, as the external world moves in on us, the internal world moves in on us, and we become less